One evening, I sat down and had dinner with my family. As always, my father told a story. Yusuf Shaheen, one of the most decorated filmmakers of all Egyptian history, owned and operated a movie theater in Cairo called Cinema Odeon. To keep the Egyptian youth passionate and interested about the art of filmmaking, he decided that college students were to receive a discount on their tickets. All they needed to show was proof of ID. My father and his group of friends were avid supporters of this theater. Shaheen's personal office even operated just above the theater, and he'd routinely shout at students from his balcony when they would get too rowdy. My father, an admirer of the prodigious screenplay writer and director, witnessed this scenario many, many times. Soon enough, Cinema Odeon became the only place they went to watch films. Not only was it cheaper, but the cinema itself valued the voice of the Egyptian youth and the stories that interested them. Whether it was more of a certain genre or even a foreign film, the cinema allowed them to be seen and allowed them to see the stories of the world that were truthful and the stories of the world that depicted their realities. Yusuf Shaheen died on July 27, 2008, and just 3 years later, the Egyptian Revolution of 2011 would unfold. A revolution that left my father protesting in the streets, left the same youth that sat in Shaheen's cinema entirely hollowed out by a place that had abandoned them, and left our journalists striving to dismantle the lies of our government. This particular story of my father's was nothing new, and it interested me because not necessarily of the deep juxtaposition of the lively memories and the solid death and destruction, but the overarching idea of loss, particularly the question of what do we lose when storytellers die, and with them, the truthful tales that they tell. I then realized that it is less about what we lose and more about how we lose them. After all, Yusuf Shaheen was more than a storyteller. He was also an influential force, one that valued truth and honor. However, Yusuf Shaheen, despite his addressing of a plethora of political and social injustices throughout his illustrious career and his facing of censorship and criticism, was also not quite a victim of the same oppression that storytellers of our modern-day society face. Yusuf Shaheen died with his dignity intact, living in a time when truth-telling was not always this dangerous. When we lose even the most modest and humble storytellers, the fire of injustice blazes more intensely, and although the fire of truth is small, we must keep it burning. Let me tell you what I mean. Mazen al-Hamada was an activist, a storyteller from Syria. Running like poison through the Syrian government's veins, he became a valiant figure of dissent, an embodiment of the brutality we must endure, the price we must pay, and the risks we must take in order for the truth to prevail. Mazen was a simple man, a man born under totalitarianism, an oil and gas technician, and casually a fighter for the human rights and liberty of his people. He supported the Syrian opposition just as most dignified citizens did, and dreamed that one day he would witness the fall of the dictatorial Assad regime. The Arab Spring of 2011 was a series of anti-government protests that resisted corruption and human rights abuse. This is when Mazen's story began. It began with hope. He participated in the Syrian revolution of that same year and pleaded for the truth to drown out the blood rivers of Bashar al-Assad. His face was not always this taunted, his eyes not always this anguished. Can someone skip next slide? Next slide. Yeah. As revolutions began to be toppled in Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, and Yemen, Syria fell into a plummet of dystopia, and Mazen's storytelling became as desperate as ever. Keep skipping, skip. Go back. Okay, and Mazen's story became as desperate as ever. He was jailed and tortured for over a year. In 2012, he was raided by security forces. They asked him, "What type of weapons did you carry?" He told them, a Toshiba camera. His activism always persisted, even in the quietest, most humble ways, in gestures as small as his aid in supplying marginalized women with baby formula. In 2014, Mazen was exiled and sought asylum in the Netherlands, where he continued to tell his stories, without fear of persecution, but still taunted by the past he left behind, the bloodshed. His stories were as powerful as they were disturbing. He never shied away from crying on camera, describing the vivid details of the agony he endured and the torture chambers he was kept in. Mazen Hamada continued to be silenced by the world, a world that failed to listen to the stories he had to offer. He died in the year 2020 after being tortured to death in the infamous Sydney prison. And just like that, Mazen's story was over, and the truth that he carried passed with him into oblivion. We couldn't carry Mazen's stories because they were dressed in heavy grief. His truth was buried, not because it was deceptive, but because the world could not stomach it. Just as the stories of Yusuf Shaheen's cinema Odeon once thrived, it is now continuously being threatened and destroyed by a world that cannot seem to realize that the truth is valuable, no matter how uncomfortable it may feel. So when we kill advocates, when we kill writers, when we kill journalists and the truth in any form it presents itself, we risk destroying a fundamental pillar that keeps our society from collapsing. We cannot address or condemn the monumental fires that exist in our modern-day world without also condemning the smaller fires that plague our societies. No matter the society and no matter the people that are part of it, every authentic narrative is a story, an inheritance to be passed down. So please, fight to preserve it. Ladies and gentlemen, our way of storytelling has changed. I realize that with the death of Shaheen and with the rise of the Egyptian Revolution, my father and the Egyptian youth lost a place where the stories of their reality were upheld. I also realized that Shaheen may have been able to tell these stories due to the nature of the time he lived in and due to the nature of what he was creating. But what I do know for sure is that our modern-day world extinguishes the fire of figures like Mazen al-Hamada, the truth that they carry, before their truth begins to burn down lies. In the world I live in, I walk a much worsened, much more treacherous path, one that leaves my generation increasingly in the dark about what goes on around them. Without stories, we begin from nothing. We begin already lost. My name is Hana Rabie. I'm 17 years old, and I've never truly put myself in a position of threat, never truly risked anything in order to do what is right. But I've listened, I've written, and I've inherited a natural urge to tell. Now, bringing you back to a full circle moment. Once, my father was chased by military officers. He ran to Cinema Odeon and bought the ticket of a movie with a price that could have very well bankrupted him just a few years prior, and hid there as an alibi. Throughout my upbringing, he ensured that these stories, these truthful encounters of what unfolded, were never forgotten, and I've kept them safe in the back of my mind, alive in the ink of my pen. After all, it is better to be painful, difficult to digest, than to be a flavorful facade that simply entertains. Believe me, it is better to be poison. Thank you.